Hey guys, this is Tombox and I'm here with Jordan Chedore, and he's going to be teaching me a very good lesson about Thunder Dragons. Apparently I've been playing them wrong. I've opened my eyes for sure. Let's hear what you have to say about Thunder Dragons.
Great. So it's not that people play them wrong or that there's a good or bad way to play it. It's that coming from multiple card games, I like maximizing my resources, and I don't see a lot of point in making large boards with decks that can do just as well with small boards. So this is pure Thunder Dragons, which doesn't want to delve into combo as much. Instead, we want to build a really consistent board with a minimum amount of cards, have as much interruptions for the opponent, and if the opponent can't play and you can make a fusion, then usually you're winning the game at that point. Right, so the most important thing is to have knowledge. I'm fortunate enough to be able to play or work with every deck, or almost every deck of the format. I would say my lowest amount of knowledge comes from playing against things that come out of nowhere. Grand Magi, for example, has had a huge rise in fame, and it can be difficult for Thunder Dragons to deal with Grand Magi if they have a lot of resources before they play the Grand Magi. Otherwise, the deck has a great matchup, just generically because of how the cards work, against every single deck of the format right now, and every single deck, rogue deck, except for Orcus, because Dingrisu just destroys this deck. Right, so your two worst matchups is definitely Orcus and Cyber Dragons, unless you're playing it very carefully. So I've played Orcus a lot. I played Orcus before and after Dingrisu, and so I just use the knowledge from that to try and plan ahead. And so while this is a fairly generic deck list, I play the deck very differently, and I have a few interesting choices that I've made that gives me an edge versus things such as Orcus and Cyber Dragon.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward for you to show me those things that you would do differently, and we'll actually talk about those interactions in a bit. But let's actually quickly look into the deck profile. It is a generic list, but maybe you can talk about several things that maybe you would do differently with those cards.
Right.
Kick it off.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm running a good amount of hand traps, just enough for me to feel comfortable about it. So I'm running 2 Ashes and 2 Ogres. The reason why I'm running 2 and 2 is because, ideally speaking, you want a strong opener, and I hate opening doubles. Unfortunately, in a 40-card deck, you do want to see the cards, so sometimes you have to run double, but I'm very fortunate that usually I tend to not open more than one of each. Ghost Ogre is really good, and I often use Ghost Ogre in a very weird interaction that I have seen other players use it for, but I often find myself using Ghost Ogre to pop Titan, because Titan is a disgusting card, since you can abuse Titan on Titan effects to get more effects, especially during the end phase.
So you use it to actually turn Titan to almost like a Cosmo tin can. Yeah,
exactly. And you can do that by making the chain link all funky, so you can end phase do a quick effect, like a Dragon Matrix quick effect, and then chain Titan, and then chain Ghost Ogre on Titan, and then on the resolution, because the protection effect of Titan doesn't activate, you can protect the Titan. Titan can banish 2 things, so sometimes I banish Roar and Dark, which...
That is massive advantage right there.
Yeah, they'll trigger right after on the next chain, and then you just resolve the chain, you get your pop, you get your pump, and you get your search and summons. So I've done this on end phase a couple of times, and most of the time it results in a win. I don't think I've resolved it on an end phase and it didn't result in a win.
Well, all your effects are fresh on the next turn, so you still have your Roar and you still have your Darks to follow up on your own turn.
Correct, yeah.
That is pretty deadly.
You do have to be very careful though, because you want to make sure that you had enough pops throughout the turn, and sometimes you can't do it, or sometimes you just get the one effect. But Dragon Roar, luckily, can't be used on the opponent's turn, so you don't have to worry about this trying to use the hand effect on the opponent's turn. So I have seen some people try to, but actual good Thunder Dragon players know that you can't use on their turn. But with the usage of Titan, you can get off the summon on the opponent's end phase or during the opponent's turn if necessary. Okay. Then next we'll move on to 3 infinite permanents. So this is fairly standard. I see some lists running 2 impermanents and 1 Imperial Order. I personally side it because I like the 3 impermanences, since you can use as many impermanences as you have in your hand on your opponent's first turn. So ideally, if I go second, I want my opponent to make as small of a board as possible. And then finally, My last hand trap is Dimension Shifter. Sorry about that. I do not play Phantasme in the deck. One, for budgetary reasons. I'm not super rich, but also I feel Dimension Shifter has a stronger place in the deck than Phantasme, because your worst matchup is Orcust, and Phantasme does not bring you closer to beating Orcust because Dingrisu can just... Well, Dingrisu doesn't carry, he doesn't target. So Dimension Shifter prevents the opponent from making the board in the first place, and since it lasts for a total of 2 turns, on your turn it works really well with other cards such as Solar. So these are the 10 hand traps that I'm currently playing. They're subject to change, but for now they're pretty straightforward. They've been pretty lively. And then for my normal summons, I have 3 Solar and 3 Dragon Matrix.
Okay. So you know there's no Aloof Lupine. Like, what is that logic?
Yeah, so I don't like Aloof Lupine overall because I wanted a super straightforward and easy to manage list, but also because Dimension Shifter can often be used as a replacement for Aloof Lupine to play around cards such as there can only be one. You can just tribute the Thunder monster off for Dimension Shifter if you leave your normal summon open, which, as I hardly play any normal summons, and since I play a deck a little funkier, I often do have the normal summon left towards the end of the combos. Unless it's, my first turn or something. So 3 Solars definitely works better, especially since it works really great in contingency with Dimension Shifter. Because if you have Dimension Shifter active and you normal Solar, you can just banish the card you send. So you can banish off the Roar and then get the summon off the Roar, banish the Dark and get the Search off the Dark.
And why don't you worry about not having any Thunders in grave to protect your assets? Right,
so if you started, then the D-Shifter is a little harder to utilize. What you can do with D-Shifter to utilize it that way, you can either not use it. So sometimes I keep it in my hand to be used with like Allure of Darkness if Allure of Darkness is relevant, or to just be used later on via Tribute Summoning, or just to keep card advantage in hand to scare the opponent. There has been a few games where, because Titan banishes 2 of any card, I've actually had 0 cards in graveyard. And I've totally used Shifter that way. So I had one game against, I believe it was Cyber Dragon Standard, and I actually got to the point where I had nothing in graveyard mid-game due to my Titan protecting on an end phase with a pop. So I had actually used a quick effect on my end phase to pop Titan and banish my last 2 cards with that. And so D-Shifter became relevant during that on his following turn, when he wanted to Foolish Burial the core to get summons off. But going first, speaking wise, you wanted Solar and Shifter. So if you're going second, then Shifter is only alive for that first turn that you have Solar. And then on your opponent's turn, all the hand effects you use with your Titan go to your graveyard to be used to save your Titan. And if your opponent can't make a big board and Titan is popping the monsters on the board or popping the resources on the board, then the amount of times you need to protect Titan is very minimum. As for Dragon Matrix, I play Pure Thunder, so most Pure Thunder deck plays 3 Dragon Matrix. I do have a card in my extra deck that makes this card a lot better because it lets me play around a lot more things. So when we get to the extra deck, you'll see that. Then we have very straightforward 3 Dark, 3 normals, 3 Roars, 3 Hawks, and the 1 Dragon Duo. Apologize if it's just a mess. It's a polymer. The whole deck's a mess, so right. So
you guys know it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 1.
And 1, yeah. So I have considered playing the second duo, but I do have a large emphasis in my playing style around the D-Shifter whenever it's relevant, and I also don't like the idea of having multiple duos in my hand, but I do like the idea of drawing the duo or searching for it every once in a while. Duo has hardly been relevant, to be honest. I've summoned it twice. I've done about 4 locals with this deck and 1 other tournament, and I've only summoned duo twice in those 16 or 20 or so rounds. Everything else is 3, which is very standard because you want access to everything as much as possible or as often as possible.
Okay.
So about here. And then for spells, we have 3 Allure for consistency purposes, and if you banish a Roar, then the card becomes insane because you lost nothing off of your banishes. You can also use it to banish your D-Shifters that become useless very easily in the mid-game. I only had those few examples where I could use it in mid-game. So then we play 3 Instant Fusion. The third one was actually my 40th card, but I didn't feel that playing a third one would negatively impact the deck. I only play 2 targets, and I don't have a way to recycle the 2 targets, but I can always set it, or I just never draw it, so I never had a problem with it. If I have 2 in hand, that's great, because I have 2 targets in the deck anyways. If I have 3 in hand, then I should probably start shuffling the deck better. 2 Desires. The second Desires was my 39th card. I don't like Desires at all, and I don't like Desires because the idea of desiring Desires into Desires is a horrible, it feels horrible, it is horrible, and you lose a lot of resources trying to get some benefit off the secondary Desires. Since everything's mostly at 3, you don't tend to lose much off the Desires. However, in my 20 or so rounds of playing this deck thus far, I've Desires away important things at least 3 times. So I've Desires all 3 Hawks, I've desired all 3 Darks, I've desired all 3 Roars. And
painful.
Yeah, in all those games I've lost most of them. I won the game that I desired all my Hawks because my ending board was good enough as it is for the deck. I was against a generic rogue deck, some sort of 60 card banished deck, so it was irrelevant. And then finally 2 Fusion, because Pure, I do see some Pure playing 3 Fusion. I just didn't want a third one getting in my way since it's recyclable with Roar. And then the Gold Stark, because it's a 1 card super combo with Roar or with Dark. Pretty much searches any piece you're missing or you want in your deck. So that's a total of 40 cards.
But it does look pretty generic.
Yeah, so the deck list is extremely generic, and that's because I wanted to just be able to make sure that I have access to at least 1 play per turn, because if I have access to at least 1 play per turn, then I tend to have at least 1 or 2 other interruptions via hand trap or via quick effects. So for the extra deck, I play a very standard 3 Colossus and a very standard 3 Titan. I know many people argue that you tend to only use 2 Colossus and 2 Titans. I'm a person who likes to waste on purpose because it lures people into a false sense of security just instinctively, because they realize, hey, all the Titans are gone, or almost all the Titans are gone, or they're running low on Titans, because you can just always refresh any of your resources for the Titan anyways. But by wasting Titans, I mean I often like to just alternatively summon Titan as early as possible when I can to try and bait out negates or bait out pathings. So by pathings, I mean ways to get to combos, either simply, or ways to get to combos that gives you a way to destroy things, or a way to force the opponent to have to do things that would make them a little uncomfortable. So I do like wasting Titans when I can.
Okay.
Then we have 2 Summoner, and that's a little different in some builds, because I see a lot of builds playing 1 Summoner and 1 Lambda. The reason why I'm not playing Lambda, 1, it's a very pricey card, so I didn't see the idea of spending $20 on it, especially when I like, once again, wasting some Summoner. So when I'm in a position where it's more grindy, or when I'm in a position where my hand's not so great, I often do keep some Summoner up when I have the opportunity. So most of the time he goes into Colossus, but when I have to keep him up, then I definitely don't mind keeping him up. You discard whichever card and you revive back something that's giving you a resource. And a lot of decks right now want to kill you as early as possible, and you know that's been Yu-Gi-Oh for many years now, but we have tons of different combo variant decks. And your worst matchup is Orcus, and if you can get a Revive Float or a Revive Search, that means you're probably not going to die that turn, or you hope you're not going to die that turn, and you're going to get something to replenish yourself for the next turn to play. So that's, I guess, the 8 generic stuff. Also super basic is my out cards. So 1 Phoenix for pops, 1 Unicorn for shuffles, and 1 Borreload for anything else that my deck can't get over. I've never made the Borreload thus far, but I will encounter someone who is going to make something that I can't get over one day. Then we have my 2 instant fusion targets. So we have Kaminari Attack and Thousand Eyes. Thousand Eyes is a very great card. It forces and baits out. It also goes with Link Rebo. So you get rid of an out or bait an out, and you Link Rebo it off. And if he gets popped, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference to your plays at all, because you don't really rely on him at all. And if he doesn't get popped, then he uses him to make Link Rebo, which is something to prevent battling, and it also frees up your extra deck slot once it's used, so you can feel free to make more fusions. And Kaminari Attack is a card I've been a big fan of. I was actually testing playing 2 for a little while, but
2?
Yeah, I was testing playing 2 for a little while because, like I said earlier, I love wasting Titans, and I ended up running 3 instant fusion, but the deck space is too tight, and the final card was the most important card of all. So this is 14 thus far, and then my 15th card is an Almirage. And Almirage is incredibly unutilized for pure Thunders because you have access to Dragon Matrix. So Dragon Matrix lets you, well, a normal summon of Dragon Matrix lets you summon an Almirage, get a search for Dragon Matrix, so that's a quick play for next turn, or a card that you can banish to make a Titan if you're in a pinch. And on top of that, you have a monster that you can get rid of at any point, or almost any point, to open up the extra deck slot that can also protect your babies, or you can protect your fusions when you don't have enough things in graveyard to protect them with D-Shifter from destruction. Additionally, the cards are great against Cyber Dragons because this is in the extra deck slot and you can get rid of it at any point instead of your important fusions. And it's great against Orcus for that exact same reason. So while Orcus sends as non-target, Almirage gives the benefit of being able to keep the extra deck slot open. So when you're playing against an Orcus and you're going second, you can use this Almirage to open up the slot after baiting out negates or sends or topological bomber plays or something of the sort, because you can use this to protect something. Additionally, it's a Cyber's Fire, so you have less pressure about your opponent using instant fusion to get rid of one of your, or 2 of your Thunder Dragons, or 3 of your Thunder Dragons, or 2 of your Darks to make something, because I often find myself passing on or having this and a Titan and a Colossus or a Titan going into the mindset that I will eventually start breaking their board. So if I have this and Titan and then I start popping their board, I will eventually have no qualms freeing up this in order to make something else in this spot. So Almirage does a lot of work.
So let's take a look at the Almirage plays that came out.
Right, so I love Almirage because Almirage serves a really good purpose in this deck. So he serves the purpose of opening up the extra deck zone. He serves the purpose of helping you play around Super Poly because he is a Fire Cyberus. He serves the purpose of playing around Cyber Dragons because you won't have your big or important pieces in the extra deck zones. And he also serves the purpose of getting easy searches off of Dragon Matrix on turns where you want to get the Dragon Matrix resource back to your hand to be used with Titan on the following turn. So generically, we have 2 main components here. So we could have, at its core, a Dragon Matrix and a Dragon Hawk, or at its core, a Dragon Matrix and an Instant Fusion. And keep in mind that these combos should be used in conjunction to make your hand or in board stronger and not based on themselves. So what's great about pure Thunder Dragons is that the strength of the board is influenced by every component in your hand and not just some basic combos. Yes, basic combos are important and good to know, but the entirety of your hand should influence your end board because that's the only way you're going to have longevity throughout the game.
So what are these extra cards here on the side?
Right, so these are some really cool pieces that you can have available to you. So the Dragon Matrix, I just kept it out easy to grab when we talk about the searching. And these 3 are good cards that you can use. Basically, to make the Titan, it requires you, of course, to banish a Thunder. So while you can get a search when you make the Almirage off the Dragon Matrix for a Dragon Matrix, it's a quick effect. You usually want to keep this in your hand to be used later on, like on your opponent's turn or on your next turn. So if you have something like this available to you, this is much better to use on the banish. So if we were to quickly zoom over to what basic board would be. So we have the normal summon of the Dragon Matrix in this example, the making of the Almirage. Then we have the search of the Dragon Matrix for the other Dragon Matrix. And then we have the instant fusion activating to summon, of course, the Kaminari attack to the zone that Almirage points to.
Yep.
And the lovely thing here is that Titan doesn't require a Thunder effect to happen in the hand to be summoned. So at its core, you could technically just banish these 2 to make a Titan, but we have to look at what else is in our hand for this combo. So if we were to back up very slightly and have any one of these cards in your hand, you can have a better Titan board. So because you'll have a pop-up. So if you have Dragon Roar in hand, you can banish Dragon Roar and Kaminari Attack to summon the Titan, and then you can summon something else from your deck, like a Dark, for example. And then you can use the Almirage to protect the Dark, or the Almirage to protect the Titan, and then you can tribute the Dark to summon Colossus.
Oh.
But that would only be applicable if you had used a Thunder Dragon effect or Thunder Monster effect, in hand earlier in that turn, because at this point in the game we had only used searches and summons. We didn't use anything in hand. On the other flip side, if we had Thunder Dragon in hand, we could discard Thunder Dragon to add 2 more Thunder Dragons, use one of the 2 to make the Titan, and have one in hand to be used in conjunction with the Titan on the next turn, following the ability to obtain a copy of Thunder Dragon Fusion, as that will recycle the 2 Titans that you have banished. And if you have a Dark in your hand, then of course you can use the Dark and the Kaminari Attack to summon Titan and search your deck for any other piece. If I have multiple in my hand, I tend to keep the quick effects, and I think that's pretty straightforward. You want to keep as many quick effects up as possible to have as much instructions as possible.
Okay, that's very smart.
And on the opposite side of the spectrum, if we had a Matrix and a Hawk, and not the Instant Fusion, then we are once again at its peak core performance, having the Dragon Matrix normal, descend for the Almirage, which then searches the other Dragon Matrix, and then we have the Hawk, which can then be discarded to summon back the Dragon Matrix, and then you can use the Dragon Matrix to make a Colossus into the zone Almirage points to. And then if you wish to keep the Colossus, that's okay. And if you wish to use it to make a Titan, you could use the Search Matrix and the Titan and the Colossus to make the Titan.
Okay.
But as I discussed earlier, it's always good to, if possible, use the entirety of your hand when building your board. So if we were to back up ever so slightly and get into a situation where we had one of these 3 that was previously mentioned, you can once again use the Dragon Roar just the same. You can use the Dark just the same, and you can use the Thunder Dragon just the same. So in each of these examples, or 2 different ways to get to this endpoint board that I ideally like to pass on whenever I have the scenario, and it also has a negate. Also has a destruction, sorry.
Okay. And all this can be done while you're under Dimension Shifter.
That is correct. All this can be done under Dimension Shifter. It's actually slightly more interesting with Dimension Shifter because Almirage can protect on the opponent's turn while they're under Dimension Shifter and you have nothing in your graveyard.
Okay, that's really cool. Okay, why don't you show me what you got?
Right, so let's try drawing a test hand. So we got a Solar, we got a Allure, we got a D-Shifter, so that's pretty good so far. We got a Thunder Dragon, and we got another D-Shifter. So that's unfortunate, but you can work with it, because now you have 1 to use and 1 to get rid of with Allure.
So what do you usually do? Say, do you go first or do you go second?
So actually, because I'm running D-Shifter, I tend to go second. Unless I know my opponent is playing something that's very inconveniencing, like Sub-Terrors. But yeah, usually I have to go blind second.
So, say this was a going second hand, we get an extra card.
Right.
That is a really good card.
That's a really good card. Actually, let's ignore this card.
Okay, so
no.
Oh,
we'll keep it. We'll just ignore it.
Okay.
We'll just play with these cards. So because we're going second.
Is this recording it? Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So because we're going second, this card is great because it lasts us until the end of the next turn. So we're gonna drop this card on the opponent during his turn. So let's say we're playing against an Orcus player. Okay. As soon as we see it live or seeing it working its magic or required to work its magic, we'll drop it on the Orcus player. So now for their first turn and our first turn, that card is active. Right, so now we go into our turn. This would have been the card that we drew. We're going to ignore this card and play with these. Since the Macrocosmos effect of Dimension Shifter is still active, we can normal Solar. And the great thing about Solar now is his effect on resolution is to send from deck to grave instead of on activation. Okay. Instead of as cost. So on resolution, he'll be sending from deck to grave, but because of D-Shifter, it will be banished instead. Yep. So we are going to go through the deck and banish Dragon Roar.
Yeah.
So Dragon Roar is banished, and because Dragon Roar is banished, he has this terrific effect of summoning any Thunder Dragon you want from your deck.
Yep.
So let's summon
The standard.
The standard Dark. Because Dark is summoned, he's a Thunder, so we have the Batterman Solar token. Let's see what I have available. I have my lovely Psyduck and Slowpoke team up. So this will be our Thunder token. And now we have tons of different ways to go about this hand. So one potential way to go about this hand, or the most obvious way to go about this hand, is to use the token and the Dark, of course, to make a Summoner.
Let's put this as a, why don't we use this as your field center right now?
Sure, why not? Yeah. So he'll go right here, we'll have this guy here, and this will be the core card in our hand. Lovely. So because Dark was banished, he'll have the effect to search.
Yep.
So let's search. So generically speaking, we have 3 different options when we search. So we can search for Dragon Matrix if you want a quick effect or something to utilize with Titan. We have Hawk if we want something a little more basic, if we know it's going to be a grind game, because we can, use Hawk to summon a Roar and then use Batterman Solar and some Summoner to make Titan Colossus or just double Colossus or something and sit on a Roar, and then have a resource available on their opponent's turn, that will be able to summon stuff and recover resources for you. Or we can use Fusion to abuse it with Thunder Dragon for some resource management purposes. So, and
why don't we try that out?
Yeah, sure. So we'll take this. We'll take this and see how this goes. So we add it to the hand, and we're going to use Thunder Dragon.
It's banished.
To add a Thunder Dragon. Then we're going to use this Thunder Dragon to add the last Thunder Dragon.
So do it one at a time because you want to max out on
Yes.
getting them out.
So the purpose of doing one Thunder Dragon at a time for this sake is we want better resource management in regards to what is being put in the banish zone to what is being shuffled into the deck, because we want things available in one of these zones in case we draw, a Hawk or get to a Hawk or get to a place where we need stuff in one of these zones to be used later on. Mm-hmm. And Thunder Dragon's great because he's not once per turn and he searches multiple copies of himself, so he's in that position where we can abuse him.
Yep.
So we have this as our resources. So now we can use this fusion if we wish. So if we were to activate this fusion, we have a wide variety of selection. We can either shuffle the 2 Thunder Dragons to make a Colossus, we can shuffle the 2 Thunder Dragons and the Dark to make Titan, we can shuffle 2 Thunder Dragons and the Roar to make Titan. Personally, I like keeping Roar active because he's the easiest to utilize with Hawk. So in this scenario, let's try shuffling 2 Thunder Dragons and the Dark to make a Titan. So we will put these here, and we will summon a Titan. So this card is effectively banished. Titan is summoned to this zone or whichever zone you feel like it. And now we have the luck of the draw. So we have a little bit of stuff with Allure, but before we do anything with Allure, we want to make sure that Thunder Dragon isn't going to get in the way, because we don't want to draw Thunder Dragon. So we're going to use Thunder Dragon again. To add, this time, we will add 2 Thunder Dragons.
So this time we actually max out.
Right, so this is how you maintain some resource control, because now you can have Thunder Dragons in your hand to be used with a Hawk, which you can lead into at some point or another, or you have a Thunder Dragon in your hand to be able to be banished off to make a second Titan. Normally you don't want to make a second Titan, but sometimes scenarios call for a second Titan. If you go into time, you can make a second Titan and play yourself max. Yeah, exactly. Or if I were to have instead made Colossus and keep Dragon banished, then we would have no way to get a Titan out unless we got the double Thunder Dragons. So I'll let 2 Thunder Dragons, and then we'll just quickly shuffle because I had forgotten to do that. And we will take a shot in the dark with Allure of Darkness.
Cut. The opponent.
Deck something, yes. And what do we get? We get an Allure, and we get a Dark. We already used Dark this turn, but the great thing about Dark is he's a quick effect, and on the opponent's next turn, he's becoming even more live because D-Shifter will be wearing off. So we will banish this D-Shifter so we no longer have to worry about having dead D-Shifters in our hand.
Remember, this is going second, this is activated during the opponent's turn.
Correct. So now we have a hand like this. Another great thing about drawing, one great thing about drawing Pot of Desires is now we've actually drawn or added to our hand all the Thunder Dragons, so we do not have to worry about losing all of our, or any of the Thunder Dragons with the Desires.
Well, we might lose Hawk.
We might lose Hawk. We could lose multiple Hawks. It's up to whether or not you feel lucky. I don't like living on gambles, but generically speaking, right now we have at least 2 Colossus or 2 Titans and a Colossus, but I don't believe that making a second Titan would be worthwhile in almost any situation. So we can use a Solar to make a Colossus, and we can use some Summoner to make a second Colossus. And right now, we're passing with 2 Prevention Negates and 1 Pop, essentially, because we have the Titan active. Additionally, once he's discarded, we'll now have 2 things in the graveyard to protect Titan.
The thing is, you can even make it the whole thing safer by actually using Gold Sark, because we did have it, technically.
Yes,
we could actually banish the Hawk, and this becomes way safer.
Yeah, we could have actually used the Gold Sark to banish the Hawk to shuffle these Thunder Dragons back in before or after the Desires, if we ever even use the Desires, or just generically shuffle these 3 back in and get 3 new cards. And then we could potentially draw other great cards for the opponent's turn or your own turn. We could, draw Roar to recover the Fusion. We could draw another Hawk to be used on the next turn, or we could have been drawing another Pop in the form of Dragon Matrix, or we could have drawn Hand Traps or other negates if we were to have used the Gold Sark. I think instinctively, when we see Gold Sark, us Thunder Dragon players tend to want to banish Dark or Roar off of it, but in this scenario, seeing as you turn off every hand trap with D-Shifter except for Ash and Impermanence, if they did not respond with Ash or Impermanence, then that Gold Sark could have actually been much better used at this point in the game to shuffle 3 cards that aren't so great or that might put you in a not as great position with a Hawk that's banished. And keep in mind, Gold Sark is only banishing it for 2 turns, so that means that during the mid game or during the time where you start getting to grind your games, you're getting a Hawk back to be used. Right, so Thunder Dragons is a great deck. Yes, Orcus tears through you if you're not careful. The important part about playing Thunder Dragons is to use the resources you do have wisely and effectively. And so when you have knowledge over other decks, you can really target those things. So Titan Pops are incredibly important, and you want to use it to tackle the focal points that Orcus players have. So being able to destroy Galatea before it becomes a problem. I do know that there's lots of Orcus variants, and some Orcus variants are better than the others. For example, Lunalight Orcus is a deck that this deck will struggle against because they only need the 2 monsters to make the Azathoth, and then you can no longer use Titan to play around their combos. At that point, there's not much we can do, but we can make as consistent of a board as possible and make sure we can do as much as possible and hit those focal points as much as possible until we get to a point where we can't. So generically speaking, I like to have at least 1 or 2 hand traps, ideally, which we don't always get to draw, but Dimension Shifter, for example, if he is my only hand trap, or if I do get a chance to open him, Dimension Shifter and Titan Pops can stop things like Lunalight Orcus. And I know the idea of drawing everything you need in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is far-fetched.
But your odds are actually pretty good, considering your deck actually has about a quarter of the deck dedicated to hand traps.
Yes. Ideally, we want to open 1 hand trap and we want to open 1 or 2 pops every time. And ultimately, there's going to be games against any deck. When you're playing any deck, there's always going to be games where there's not much you can do. But I haven't found myself in a time and place where I had nothing to do going into these matchups. So I think knowledge is everything. If you know you're playing against an Orcus, or if you start playing against an Orcus, play around the fact that they do have limited resources to get rid of things. They're going to be using their Dingrisu to get rid of your big monsters. If you have smaller monsters floating on the side, you'll be recovering resources throughout the game to be able to combat the fact that they have Dingrisu going off as much as they possibly can. / if you have enough pops, you can potentially prevent Dingrisu from hitting the board in the first place.
Thank you so much, Jordan-sensei. You are actually enlightening me about a lot about Thunder Dragons that I never really thought about, especially with the release of Battle Legends, Almirage. I kind of disregarded the deck for the longest time, but it is one of my favorite decks, and I'm really happy that you're sharing your insights with me, and not just me, but with my audience as well. So thank you so much, Jordan. Also, this guy really taught me a lot about Jordan as well.
Yes. Yeah. I do what I can with what I got, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan. You know, any shout outs you want to give?
Shout outs to my friend Michael. He loves you YouTubers, so he's going to be jealous when he watches this video. Shoutouts to my other friends at my locals. I play at many locals, but I guess Menard Comics, the locals I help out, and Montreal players, all Montreal players. We had a great showing at this coming YCS for Montreal. We had many Montrealers in top 32. Keep up the great work, guys, and hopefully we can bring home a win next time.
Niagara Falls?
Niagara Falls, yeah, YCS Niagara Falls.
All right. So thank you guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit me with a thumbs up. I recommend you guys just don't. I'm not gonna put a list on the side on this one because I think the information is much more important than the deck list itself. So, anyways, thanks guys. Hit thumbs up. Ding the subscription bell, notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Subscribe to MST.TV.
Oh, I love that.